everybody, Adam here with So Wizard Podcast, and I'm sitting down with Chris and Patrick from the comic Discordia. It's now on Kickstarter. How you guys doing?
Good.
Well, man, very well. How about yourself?
Doing good. I know it's pretty early for you guys with the East Coast, West Coast difference, so I appreciate you making the time.
Appreciate you having us on.
Yep, West Coast got to represent.
Always happy to help independent creatives. So before we get into Discordia itself, how did you guys get into comics and start working together?
Ooh, all right. I'm gonna send that one to you, Patrick. You got into it first, yeah.
Well, so I did a bachelor's of science in art at Oregon State University, and so I worked on doing some sequential pages towards my junior and senior year. I took several rounds of independent study classes with a professor named Andy Myers, who's actually really cool. It's definitely my favorite professor who I took classes with the whole time in school. Yeah, and then I just started plucking away and trying to apply to as much as possible as soon as I graduated. Even really the last year that I was in school, I was applying, and I did a couple teeny tiny little online comics and anthologies and stuff. I've always been into comics though. I think also in school I did it was my freshman year. I had to do an Art 101 class, and I did a research paper on Sean Murphy's Punk Rock Jesus, and that was maybe when I got seriously into trying to figure out how to do comics. But I'd always been a comics fan.
Nice.
I was on the writer end of it. Had always been a comics fan, but I'm actually a novelist as well. And I was looking for someone to do some art just to tie in concept art for some of the creatures and characters in my book. And also being an OSU grad, I reached out through a alumni Facebook group, and Patrick hit me back to do some art. And then as we were talking about that, that's when I was like, hey, I've always wanted to do a comic book. And we did Tarnish together, which is a fantasy graphic novel that takes place in the same world as my books. And that's how we got hooked up and started working together. And then shortly after that, we were like, hey, I've got this idea for this horror comic. Let's make this too. So
nice. That's cool. Natural fit.
Yeah. It was an easy transition for us, I think. Once we had gotten through kind of working some of the kinks out and learning each other's styles on the fantasy book, when we, both being horror fans, decided to jump into this next project, we became co-creators on this one. So we kind of workshop through the writing process and the planning and the designs together. It's very much something we're making as a team. And I think this one has worked out even 10 times better than the last project.
Do you find that helps when it goes from scripted words to how it translates to the panel? Since you're both collaborating from the start, you kind of have the same vision?
Yeah, I do. I think so. Yeah, it's actually, I think it's been really good. I hope it comes out on the pages that it looks good. But it's a lot more fulfilling too. You just have a little, as artists, a lot of times you just get scripts and then expected to just churn them out with multiple revisions because it doesn't match what was in the writer's head. But it's really nice to be able to take a script and read it, internalize it, and be like, okay, well, I like this. Why don't we X, Y, and Z? Or would it be okay if we do a top-down angle, or whatever it is, or do add a couple close-up panels here just to emphasize this bit? And Chris is always really receptive, and yeah, so on that end, it's nice for me because I just feel like I have more investment in it, as a co-creator, as opposed to just being work for hire. It's nice to have a little bit more stake in it.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I think on the writer end, you really have to embrace how collaborative of an art form comics is, which took me just a little bit to get used to, coming from the novel side, which is obviously really just all me. But once you really fit into that groove, you realize how much better of a product you're going to make if it's, because I'm not an artist at all. So if I don't take Patrick's input, then my ideas for how it should look visually probably aren't going to come across as well, because that's just not a skill set that I have. So I think, I don't know, there's something really, really cool about seeing the art and the page actually come together. It was like when I was really into video production, I loved editing for whatever reason, because I liked seeing that finished product start to form. So I really love seeing the art pages come back, and I'm like, oh, cool. That's like what I was thinking, or better than what I was thinking. And so I think it's leaning into that really helps the final comic just be as strong as possible. And so that's something that I've been super excited about, and I don't know, it's almost more fulfilling to me than my novel writing. So,
Nice.
It's also just possible that I don't follow direction, and I'm stubborn. I don't know. That could also be. It's like a 50-50.
it works. You're a very talented toddler.
Thank you.
And now you just mentioned video production. Did you find that having some experience in that helped you think more visually as you were writing the actual script or layout?
Absolutely, actually. When I was also at Oregon State, that was kind of the side that I focused on more, was video. I kind of wanted to be a director for a while, so I wrote a couple screenplays, of course. Who doesn't in college, right?
Mhm.
And I made some short films, and where I had to direct and do the cinematography and the editing and all of it. So that definitely helped. I took some courses where we had to do lots of storyboarding and think about angles up front. And I think that actually did translate fairly well. I mean, being a longtime comics fan helps too, because I can kind of think of like, okay, I've seen other books do this on the page. I kind of think some falling panels like this would be cool. This is where a close-up should be. So for sure that helps me, but I still always try to defer to Patrick's eye when it comes to that thing, for sure.
That's smart. Go with the artist.
Yeah, right.
So, Patrick, you were primarily from an art background, is what I gather. Did you ever delve into the writing side before this collaboration?
I had, yeah. I took a decent amount of writing in school. I almost considered getting a minor in English or in like creative writing or something, but it was going to be like a whole nother term's worth of classes to finish up. And I wasn't sure how valuable it was, like from a portfolio or like resume standpoint. And but I really enjoyed and took a lot of classes, especially like upper division fiction classes. There was a decent amount of that at OSU, which was kind of weird, but it was a really good way to, or at least I found it very interesting to like get a grasp on what storytelling is about, if that makes sense, because it was more from the English side, or English classes, not even necessarily writing classes. So I feel like I had a decent like foundation in what like the mechanics of storytelling before I got to like stretch my wings and actually do some.
Nice. Yeah, I feel that is important. A lot of people maybe overlook that in the beginning because you've seen a million movies by this point. You think you know how a story flows, and generally you do, but
Yeah, for sure.
so your collaborative. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Your collaborative process, you said you both kind of break the story, and then Chris, you're primarily the writer, Patrick, you're primarily the artist. So do you break the story, then split off, write a script, revise it together? Like, what's your...
Yeah, actually, that's pretty much it. We kind of, maybe I'll come up with a concept, or Patrick will. We'll toss it back and forth for a little bit. I'll come up with a script. He'll send me some revisions, like, hey, I think if we did this here, maybe we could punch up the dialogue in these couple places. We'll do a revision, and then he does the art, of course. And then before I get it over to Tobin for letters, I'll do like one more pass over the dialogue just to make sure, now that I have the page in front of me, like, hey, maybe some of these speech bubbles could be a little smaller. Let's, just I refine it a couple times just to make sure that the finished product is as strong as it can be. And then actually, we're doing something a little different. One of the shorts, when we get into talking about the book, Patrick wrote as well. that we're trying to add in with a social stretch goal. So he did all the writing, and I just did revisions on that one and kind of fact checked the lore, and we went back and forth on it. But I let him play on that one start to finish. So
Nice.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about a couple times before. But since Chris has a background in doing like in fantasy novels, he's really good at world building, and so that's something that he really brings to the table, is like his ability to lay out histories and locations and events and keep all of that straight is just top notch. I I have such a hard time with that kind of stuff. I find it a huge barrier to entry whenever I've tried to write my own stuff, just because I can get bogged down in that for what feels like years. But having Chris being able to lay that stuff out, and then me being able to ask and be like, oh, okay, so if I want to do a story based in like kind of an industrial city, like where could that be, and like what historical elements or like political elements do I need to consider when writing that? It was really, really helpful for me.
That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of the well, for TV terms, it would be your show Bible, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, we have a couple documents on Google Drive that are vaguely formed as a show Bible.
Nice,
I need to like put them all in one place, but yeah, most of it's still up here, which is a problem. I need to. I always have 10 times more in my head than I ever get on paper, but
Yeah, it's your grunt work part of it you got to do.
yeah, right.
That's
where
really
we need
cool.
an assistant.
Yeah, seriously. So this novel you're talking about ties into Discordia, or is this a separate project?
That's separate. So my fantasy series is called The Gods and Men Cycle. The first book's Wrath of the Fallen. There's another novel, Cries of the Forsaken. There's a bunch of shorts, novellas, things like that. And then that's where Patrick and I got together initially with some concept pieces for that series, and then eventually Tarnished, which was the graphic novel. So I've, just kind of the skill set that I formed while writing that series is what I really relied upon with Discordia. I love horror, but most, not all, but most horror takes place in some version of our world. It may not be exactly our world, but it's usually Earth of some kind. And I wanted to do a complete secondary world for Discordia that had its own history, its own continents, its own people. And so I don't know if you've seen the map that we had done up for it, but it's we actually commissioned a pretty detailed map from a guy who does fantasy maps. And I really tried to lean into that so that you had that depth and level of world building that you would expect from an epic fantasy series, but in a horror setting, just because I thought that would be cool, because there's not as many of those as there are just, somebody's possessed down the street in your little small town. As cool of a story as those are, I wanted to do something different. So we totally made our own setting for it. And I think that was really rewarding.
I do like that concept. It is very unique. And until you spell it out, you don't really think that most horror, well, maybe people think it's too much for an audience or a readership to take. It's like, here's a new world and here's supernatural elements in that world.
Right. Because like a big inspiration for me on the horror side in terms of how much world building you can pull off is like Hellboy, BPRD, like the Mignolaverse. Really does a good job of having this big mythology and a history that goes over hundreds of years in that series, but it is all set on a version of Earth, and that really allows Mike to lean into incorporating real world mythologies and stuff, and it's super, super cool and very deep, but it's still Earth. Mm-hmm. So
that makes sense. So we're kind of talking about it and dancing around at the same time. Do you want to get into your full-on synopsis of what Discordia is?
Take us away, Chris.
All right. So Discordia takes place on a continent called Odessa. The main story takes place about 35 years after the fall of a fascist empire. It's very much World War II-esque. They almost conquered the entire continent, and then what I've been calling the inciting event happened that made their empire crumble. Reality shifted, and some things woke up that had been asleep for a long time. You know, that's somewhat of a familiar horror trope, and that's kind of what made everything fall apart. This empire was called the Concord, and that's why the series is called Discordia, because colloquially that's what the survivors call the area that the Concord controlled after their fall, because now it's the opposite of an ordered, structured empire. It's chaos. The Concord rose to prominence because the world had always been plagued with your classic monsters, vampires, werewolves, undead, and they kind of united the people through this strength ideology of crushing and pushing out all the supernatural stuff while sacrificing all your rights, of course. But then now we've got some more of these Lovecraftian entities that are kind of seeping into the world that got awakened by the events that caused the Concord to fall. So the comic that we're kickstarting right now, issue 0, is a collection of shorts that flesh out the world building and kind of give you like a little bit of a slice of life from different portions of our world. Each one takes place in a different country. They're all slightly different time periods. Some of them are right before the Concord falls or as the fall is happening. Some of them take place after the fact. And they just kind of give you a taste of what's to come. And then eventually it will be a full-on ongoing series where we have set characters that are kind of going on this odyssey through this hellscape that is Discordia, as they are tasked with bringing in this little girl that's immune to the plague. That is one of the reasons that the Concord fell, because towards the end of the war, these aliens invaded, actually, bringing a plague with them. And this girl is immune to that. And so they are on the hunt for her so that her blood can, of course, be weaponized to kind of bring control back to society. And that's going to be the ongoing story. But right now we're just doing these shorts that we've had on Webtoon, and now doing the physical release with Kickstarter to kind of give everyone a taste of what's to come.
That sounds awesome.
That's like my 40-story elevator pitch. It's like a really long elevator ride.
So it sounds like there's plenty of room in this world for you, Patrick, to just go crazy with creature design, creation, whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah, it is. And especially starting with the shorts was a really fun way to do that, because we could just go in and do something that was going to look great and have like a couple of like big gut wrenching moments and have some like real shock value, and just try to make it like look and feel like as stylish and as cool as possible without having to without having to spend a lot of time doing character development and stuff, because we've got that all coming for the main series. But because there's so many elements going on and there's so much rich history and so many different kinds of monsters and stuff, the shorts was a really cool way to explore like all the elements of that without having to like make somebody sit through an entire book before getting to figure out what X, Y, or Z was. We could just like show them that and be like, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is going to be really fun. Come back for some more later. I don't know. I think it was a really cool way to just like stretch our legs creatively, but I also think the result is pretty sweet. I don't think that there's a lot of people doing shorts for comics anyways, at least not in like very mainstream comics, and especially in horror there's something so snappy about a short. Like it has such a rich tradition of short stories, like like actually H.P. Lovecraft, but also like The Twilight Zone or even Tales from the Crypt, which we were talking about the other week. And so it was really fun to get to participate in some of that.
That's awesome.
It's interesting to come up with and script out something where like everyone's dead within 6 pages.
You don't have to worry about consequences.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, the consequences are what get them all killed.
True, yes.
Yes, yeah.
And actually some of the events of all the shorts do weave in to the continuous story, like in some way or another, whether it's just as like an example of an event that was happening, like it's just a snapshot in the history of this world, which is so expansive and has all this richness and depth to it, as well as the short that we have as a stretch goal is going to be like the preface or the
It's like a prologue.
prologue, yeah, to the continuous story. So we're hoping to hit that and give everybody a taste of what's coming on this on Zero issue.
Okay, and you mentioned this all started on Webtoon. How long has that been going on?
Jeez, I
Oh,
don't know.
I think about a year.
Yeah.
Not consistently. So we came out with the Frowning Man first, which is almost been like the most popular short. Really, he's just such a cool, creepy character. He's on 3 of the different covers that you can get for the comic because all our variant artists were just like, I love this guy. We did that first, got a really good response, and we're like, okay, let's come up with another one. And so then I wrote Eldritch Storm, but we ended up kickstarting Tarnished and finishing that up, and that took a long time. And then after that, pandemic happened, and all these all these other things kept happening, and finally we're like, hey, we need to get back into this. And then it was consistently releasing. Once we decided to dive back in, we consistently had content on Webtoon, I think like every 2 weeks until the Kickstarter launched. So there's 3 shorts that you can read on there that are in issue 0. The Frowning Man, Eldritch Storm, which is the longest one, and then the Plague Bearers. And then when we hit 100 backers, we're adding a little 2-page short tentatively titled The Rats on the Wharf, which is a fun one I've been kicking around for a while in my head. Our social stretch goal will be Fear Factory, which is the one that Patrick wrote. So when we get enough retweets and shares on our pin posts on Facebook and Twitter, we'll add that one. And then the 3 Faces of God is our stretch goal. If we get $1,000 over our funding goal, we'll add that one. So potentially 6 shorts will be in this in the PDF or the physically printed comic, whereas our Webtoon people have only got to read 3.
It's gonna be beefy.
Yeah, that's a really cool rollout. I like that.
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. So I mean, we'll definitely hit at least 2 of those 3. But even without them, it's a full size. It's like 23 pages of content. Plus, we'll have some pinups and other stuff in the back. So you get a full size comic already. But if we hit all 3 of these goals, it's definitely going to turn into like a double size issue, which is exciting for issue 0. Being an anthology and doing all this heavy lifting with the world building. It's cool that we've kind of got it set up that it can be twice the size of what you would expect. So
For sure, yeah. So you've been doing this on Webtoon. When you started, was there any plan of, hey, let's do this, let's build up an audience, build up, somewhat of a following, and then we'll jump into more traditional physical media? Or is it just kind of like, hey, this is fun, and it grew and grew?
I think from the beginning we knew we wanted to do it this way. For example, Patrick does the art in the normal comic pages because we knew eventually we would do a physical release, and then I have the unenviable task of cutting his artwork up into little pieces to put in that vertical formats for Webtoon. So, and I feel horrible because I'm like, oh, we're losing so much art. And
and conversely, or additionally, I feel horrible laying out a page with a bunch of inlaid panels or doing a splash page or whatever, and just being like, I have no idea how Chris is going to put this into a like 420 by 420 pixel box that's going to scroll.
Yeah, and then Tobin will slap some word balloons on there that go from lean over one panel into another, and I'm like, oh, now I got to like erase this and cut and move stuff. And no, but it's been great because the Webtoon's purpose was to build a little bit of a following and give people a taste of what we were doing. I didn't want to ever sacrifice our goal for what we wanted the finished product to look like just for basically the marketing campaign through Webtoon. So I think we did a good job of not sacrificing any of our normal instincts for a digital or physical release just to cut it up to that vertical format. So
I think that's really smart.
It also means too that even if people have read the Webtoons, there's still a lot that you haven't seen even in the first 3 shorts, just because of the way that we had to crop stuff to get it onto the Webtoons format. So even if you've read the first 3 shorts, there's still a lot to check out in the Kickstarter. Not to pitch and pander too hard, but it's true.
No,
Yeah.
you should.
The Plague Bearer story, for example, has got this awesome 2-page spread that is just probably the coolest piece of comic art that I think Patrick has done. Just with the level of detail, it's like a big trench warfare scene when an alien invasion goes down, and it's really awesome. And on the webtoon, you just get a couple little like pieces I had to cut out of that, and you really miss the artistry of that page. So I mean, that 2-page spread alone is worth your investment on the Kickstarter.
Nice.
Seriously. Yeah.
That's an interesting point too, because comics are going very digital now, but there is definitely something lost, even on something like Marvel Unlimited Comixology, where they have that like zoom and read feature, which you should get closer look at the art. It's just not the same.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like somebody needs to come out with a tablet that is specifically for comic reading. That screen is the size of a comic opened up flat, so that you could see it real size, and I would totally buy that. But until that happens, I still read my comics physically because I don't like having to zoom and scroll around the page on a PDF and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
And I imagine for you, Patrick, as an artist, it might get frustrating sometimes where you spend all this time with the perfect layout that draws and guides the eye, and then someone just double taps with their finger and it just kind of
skips over it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I have done a few. Yeah, I have some stuff that's up places digitally other than the webtoons. But I gotta say, I don't read my own stuff after I after I send off the pages. That's usually the last look that I have at it. So I haven't experienced the double tap. Maybe I should. That would be wise.
Maybe not though.
Yeah. I'm gonna get a really frustrated text message once you do that finally.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys found your process. I would just stick to what you've been doing.
Yeah.
So when you obviously you both prefer to traditional medium, how is the art process? Is it like digital paintings? Is it all hand drawn?
It's all hand drawn. So the line art is all traditional. I do use brushes instead of pens for the most part. Sometimes I use a little bit of dip pen, or like occasionally a micron, but I try to do as much of it as possible with a brush, just because like the texture and stuff that you can, and the variety of line work that you can get with a brush is just so much higher. But the color is all digital. So I think that's pretty standard nowadays. Some people still do watercolor or even like Copic marker. I've seen people do pretty cool stuff actually, but yeah, this is actually only the second book that I've done color on. So having a little bit of wiggle room and the ability to have powerful editing tools has been really helpful for me doing the color. So yeah, that's got to be digital. But yeah, I try to do as much of it as possible with my hands.
That's very cool. You're still using brushes. That's got to be more of a unique art now than it was.
I don't know. I mean, I think definitely more and more artists are doing digital as the technology catches up, and like you can actually do. I mean, there are some really cool stuff that you can do digitally. But I've kind of found that it is a different skill set, and since I went to art school, I took a lot of art classes. I have the muscle memory for brush strokes, but not necessarily for flipping through a bunch of presets on a stylus and going back and forth. I mean, it's similar, but it's not the same. So maybe eventually I'll pick it up, but hasn't happened yet.
That's really cool. I like that. I like you're keeping it traditional. I don't
doing what I can. Get off my lawns, kid. Kid's lawn. Something. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you guys short at all. Zoom just gave me a 10-minute warning. But I know you also have to get to work. But I wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to get your socials out there, get your Kickstarter out there, give your Webtoon link, anything you needed to really get out there.
Yeah. If you want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all at Discordia Comic. If you look us up, if you go to any of those places or go to our website, discordiacomic.net, you're going to find links everywhere for the Kickstarter. If you just go to Kickstarter and just search Discordia, we should be the first thing that pops up. So make sure to jump on there. We've got lots of backer tiers, digital, all the print copies. We've got Patrick's standard cover. We have a bunch of really cool variant covers. We got hooked up with a lot of very talented artists for that. So you can either pick your favorite cover. You can get all of the covers at once. We've got a level for that. If you own a comic shop, we've got a retailer level for you as well, so you can kind of get it in bulk. We've got a couple spots left where you can get some original art. The backer levels where you get drawn into issue 1 all got snatched up really quickly, but we do have one left. You can be drawn into one of the stretch goal stories. So there is a top level. You can be the main character who gets brutally killed by giant mutated rats for that issue 0 short that we're going to add when we hit 100 backers. And as of this recording, we're only 5 away. So we got 95 right now. So you can back that. That's a pretty for sure thing that'll be in the book. Yeah, I think I covered all the bases with all of those. So yeah, definitely check out the website, check out the Twitter. I'm way more active than Facebook, but follow us on both.
For sure. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Probably Instagram is the best place to follow me for art stuff. Other social media seem to just devolve into me yelling about politics at people, which not everyone appreciates, myself included, honestly. But my Instagram is Patrick BUER Art.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys. Good luck with the Kickstarter. It sounds like it's already going great, but we'll make sure we get this out in time.
For sure, man. Appreciate having us on.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Again, thanks for taking the time and making the early morning work.
Of course.
Our pleasure.
Very cool. Thanks again. I appreciate it. So everybody, make sure you check out Discordia on Kickstarter, socials, get those 3 reach goals, then everybody gets more.
Absolutely.